just after 1. See, we're still missing a couple people, but hopefully they'll join shortly.
Okay, it is just about ready. Just 1 second. There we go, we're live.
All right, everybody, welcome to the November 8th CVTA Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We will start with a roll call and certification of a quorum. Janice?
Okay, hold on 1 second. I have one other person that just came in. Okay, we'll start with Town of Ashland, Miss Amos. Charles City County, Miss Russell.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Here.
Miss Walker. Goochland County, Mr. Campbell.
Here. Sorry.
Thank you. Goochland, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez.
Here.
Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Chair Yor.
Here.
Ms. Smidler.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Stoddard. Ms. Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine. City of Richmond, Vice Chair Clark. She's here. Hold on 1 second. We'll go back to her. City of Richmond, Mr. Bridewell. VDR PT, Mr. Brule. Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Mann. Mr. Riblet. Virginia Port Authority, Ms. Nelson.
Here.
GRTC, Ms. Robinson.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Dean. And Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Let me just check. I think we have Ms. Dean. Let me move her to panelist. Ms. Dean?
Present. Thank you for moving me.
Thank you. I believe we have everyone, and that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And I see Ms. Clark has joined us from City of Richmond. So,
Okay.
welcome, Corona.
Yep.
And
Here.
we have nobody from VDOT on at the moment.
Mr. Mann, I thought I saw his name. I'm not sure if we lost him, but I thought I saw his name earlier.
Okay. Hopefully somebody can join us from VDOT shortly.
Was
So-
a message lit?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. There's a message in the chat from Liz that says Mark Riblet is listening on YouTube, I think.
Okay.
Great. Is there any way we can let him in case he needs to speak? Or I see, does he log in?
Yeah, he's not logged into Zoom, so I can't move him over to panelist, but if he does, I'll keep watching and see if I can do that if he does log in.
Okay, very good. All right, so next item is the statement regarding virtual meetings. It says 100% virtual meeting. The statement regarding this policy is included in the CVTA calendar for this meeting. Next item is consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. Chet, I'm not aware of any agenda changes.
No, sir. We did add a couple links to the agenda over the weekend as new information was finalized for review today. So if everybody has not seen that, that is there for your use in our discussions.
Very good. That was primarily the project process timeline.
Item 7, yes.
Yep. Okay, very good. Next item would be approval of the October 12th CVTA TAC meeting minutes. If everybody's had a chance to review, if we have any additions, corrections, otherwise we'll entertain a motion.
Chair, this is Darrana, so moved.
Thank you, Dorana. Do we have a second? Please and thank you.
This is Tom. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. All right, so we have a motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item is 3, public comment period. Do we have anybody registered to make a public comment?
No, sir, we haven't had any registrants for public comment. Looking at the attendees, I don't see anyone that is not agency-based, but if there is anyone in the attendee list that is on the meeting today and wishes to register a comment, the Q&A at the bottom of the screen is an option.
Okay, if anybody puts anything in later, we can come back to that. Next
Sure.
item is CVTA TAC Chairman's report. I have nothing to report other than welcome to the month of November. So next item, CVTA TAC staff update. Chet, you lead that.
Just quickly, wanted to give an update on the Finance Committee. They don't meet until Wednesday, but the agenda itself, I think it's Wednesday. The agenda has a closed session for consideration of financial advisor candidates. There was an interview process that was carried out by the Finance Directors Working Group, and a recommendation will be made, I believe, at the Finance Committee meeting for a candidate to move forward in terms of contract for financial advisory services. The other thing that there's going to be I think a staffing update for the Finance Committee from Ms. Heater. And then the last thing to note is that there will be an agenda item to approve some of the actions that we'll be discussing here today, including the 6-year regional budget for regional funds for approval or recommendation by the Finance Committee, and then consideration of funding scenario for those, how the first 2 years of funds will be allocated. So those 2 things are on the agenda for a Finance Committee. Other than that, I don't believe there's any other staff update at this time.
Okay, thank you, Chet. So regarding the item on the finance for the regional projects budget and funding scenario, is the ask also going to be for them to look at years 3 through 6 and help sort of guide what that budget is, because that's going to come back to TAC from the standpoint of what are the next round of regional projects.
Yes, sir. Quickly, part of the well, we'll do this under item 7 too, but the October 29th authority meeting considered a single page spreadsheet from the Finance Directors Working Group, I believe out to the year 2028, regarding estimated and forecast regional funds based on the VDOT forecast. So that's essentially what's going to be on the agenda for Finance Committee to consider in an official capacity, making a recommendation to use those forecast numbers for the regional funds as kind of the guidance, at least at this point, for making future decisions.
Gotcha.
We do know that there will be, VDOT will be updating those estimates in December of this year. So there's an opportunity to change that when those new estimates are done.
Got you. And I guess also what also has to be factored into all that is what amount of reserve the authority wants to hold back for.
Yes,
the
sir.
outcome. So that still has to be contemplated and decided on, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's part of finance's discussion this week. Is the holding back part.
No, I don't believe that they're in a position to have that discussion.
So it's
Part of this is
just-
also dependent on the financial advisor hiring and how all that,
So it's
Plays out.
just the projection part of it.
yes.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get clarification on, because I'm aware that the finance working group hasn't really talked in any detail about the reserve holdbacks and all those things. So that will need to happen over, I guess, the next couple months as well.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Chet on the staff update? All right, not hearing any. Moving on to item 6, GRTC Microtransit Study Overview. Patricia, you're gonna handle this?
Hi, yeah, good morning. I'm Tricia Robinson, the planning manager for GRTC. I just wanted to provide a high-level update for GRTC's microtransit study. So I have with us today the two consultants for this project, Nick Britton with Michael Baker and Jessica Alvarez with Foursquare. The study includes reviewing the existing conditions, suitability, best practices, and we'll be doing a coordinated outreach with the public as well as with the jurisdictions. I will note that the initial survey for public feedback is up and launched on the GRTC page, and I'll also include a link in the chat box as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick and Jessica for the overview.
All right, thanks, Patricia. My name is Nick Britton. Are we able to show am I able to share my screen?
You should be able to, Nick.
Does everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, great. So thanks for having us on the agenda today. We are going to do a pretty high level, as Patricia said, a high level review of the study, what we're doing, and what we've accomplished so far, and then what we have left to do in this study. So just as far as the agenda goes, a real quick scope overview, just to discuss sort of the purpose of the study, kind of what we're trying to get out of it, and then what we'll do with that information that we learn. We'll talk a little bit about the survey that was just mentioned, and I have a link in here if we want to just preview it. And then finally, we'll talk next steps with, the survey launch, which just happened last week, and then jurisdiction one-on-one meetings with those jurisdictions in January, the two big ones. So I will pass it to Jessica to go over sort of the basics of microtransit. So take it away, Jessica.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Can you all hear me all right? I was having some issues earlier. So basically, we're starting off this study with kind of defining what microtransit is to the region. We're doing a comprehensive existing conditions analysis, looking at a lot of demographic data and the existing services that are currently throughout the Richmond region, looking across the 9 jurisdictions. What a lot of people don't understand is there's just varying levels of microtransit and on-demand transit that can be implemented in an area. So we just wanted to, kind of wrap that into a report to, allow people to understand what we're trying to do. And as you can see here, we kind of define on-demand transit, which is a little bit more scheduled, might be closer to a paratransit service, a ride finders, versus as you make your way to be more flexible and maybe even a little less communal and public, you get to microtransit where you have that flexible service. Maybe you can use an app to schedule the same day a service. So we just, just to kind of give you a sense, microtransit can really have varying levels of flexibility and size vehicles, whether it's an individual taxi versus a small shuttle or a minibus. next slide. So to start off the analysis, as I talked about, we're going to do an existing conditions where across the region, we're going to look at the propensity or the natural tendency for people to use transit. We look at those populations that really need transit and rely upon it, low income, no car households, to identify where and to what extent transit is needed. And we compare this with density data. We're not looking for zero density or anything, but we're also not looking for super densities that might support more of a fixed route system. So we're kind of looking at that low to medium low densities that would support and create a successful microtransit service that might not be served by traditional transit. And then we combine these factors to get a microtransit suitability analysis that shows when transit might be the most successful. And we're going to compare it to what's existing in the region, whether it's fixed route or existing on-demand services or paratransit services, to understand where there might be gaps that need to be addressed, and we can, kind of address them with this microtransit service. And then we head back to Nick.
Yeah, so we're going to have a fairly detailed public and stakeholder outreach portion of the study. The first round of it will be the needs assessment. That'll include some focus groups with providers and other stakeholders in the area, 1 to 2 of those. And then the virtual public outreach will be through that detailed survey that we mentioned, and I'll show the details up later. We're going to emphasize educating people on what microtransit is, because I don't think that there's a really comprehensive understanding of what that might look like. But then we're going to really dovetail that education with a look at what people's travel needs are, and then their preferences for getting around and mobility. This will be advertised through GRTC's website, and then there are other social media platforms, and I believe some of that is already underway. And then the second round is going to be presentation of the recommendations. We'll again have another survey to present and emphasize what these recommendations are and how we're prioritizing them, and what these potential implementation of microtransit solutions throughout the area would look like. And then we're going to meet individually with the jurisdictions in the MPO area to discuss these recommendations and then make adjustments as needed. Jessica.
The third task, which is kind of coupled with our existing conditions, is we've been doing a best practices of microtransit services and on-demand services across the country to kind of understand how these services are used, the purpose, what kind of use case, first and last mile, maybe connecting to an existing transit service, a new service area where there was no existing transit, or even fixed route or paratransit replacement services, paratransit supplemental services. We also just kind of look at different characteristics of the service that might be pertinent to the Richmond region and fleet sizes that other agencies have used that should be considered. And we're getting lessons learned and key takeaways that we want to apply to this project based on what these agencies have done. This will also, the information we're collecting is going to lead to a microtransit peer analysis where we identify 5 peers that are similar in size and context to the CVTA Richmond region area. So we're in the process of doing that right now, and here are some potential peers that we've started thinking on. They're not our top 5 at the moment, but just to give you a sense of what we're looking at. In the next task, we're looking at operational challenges and opportunities where we're really focusing on the region. We want to meet with some of the local service operators to understand what they're doing and how they see this type of service operating. Are there any key platform or key features that you can be considered when we look at microtransit, things like that? And we feel like the local operators would have a better understanding of what passengers need. And then we'll also take those 5 peers that we identified and go and do in-depth interviews with them to really understand and ask them pertinent questions to this project, so we understand challenges or opportunities that could be associated with implementing this microtransit service. And the fifth and final task will be our recommendations and next steps. So basically everything we've heard in the previous 4 tasks is going to kind of filter into this task. The first step will be identifying zones across the study area. So we don't just look at specific areas and move forward with that. We want to kind of cast a wide net where microtransit might be successful. So we have a lot of different high-level zones that might make sense for on-demand transit. And then we take another, do another analysis, or step 2, where we prioritize and evaluate these zones to get an understanding of how they would actually operate and what their best use case would be if these zones got pushed forward. And then based on our prioritization and the funding available, we take the top zones and we actually design the services. So right now the zones are like very high level and aren't super defined. But once the zones kind of filter to the top, we go in and design the service area, the service hours, develop an implementation plan, and estimate out the capital and operating costs to implement each service area.
So just in terms of schedule, you can kind of see the outline of and deliverable list here. Right now, we are about to kick off the agency and the agency interviews, and then the peer agency interviews that we just mentioned a couple of tasks ago. And the survey is also live this month, and we might extend it out into December just to get a few more results, just to see kind of what the participation rate is at the end of the month. So we'll look into that a little bit more as far as timeline goes. But like we said, we've been doing a lot of the background tasks and research up until now, and then we're sort of expanding the outreach portion of it now in November. Just to mention a couple what the deliverables are, we've submitted the existing conditions technical memo to GRTC, the best practices one was submitted. The existing conditions one is forthcoming, and then 2 other memos, one of the operation challenges and one outlining the financial plan for this for the recommended services would occur in January, late November, and then early January. In terms of meeting timelines, you can see that the round 1 survey is, as like we mentioned, it's already live, and I provided a link here if we want to just take a look at it. We'll have those agency and peer agency interviews, like I mentioned, this month. And then the round 2 survey will kick off in December over the holidays, but we'll try to extend it into January and get a lot more participation. And we'll be relying on GRTC to provide some of that social media awareness and kind of advertising of that survey. And then we'll finally conclude with a review with all the jurisdictions in the area. Now, this will include, even though it might be out of the NPO area, we'll include talking to New Kent and Charles City, Powhatan, Goochland, because they do, Bay Transit does offer service, for example, on the 2 eastern counties now. And we may be looking at microtransit options in other parts of the area that may be outside of the NPO boundaries. So we'll have those jurisdictional meetings in January. And that is a conclusion. Would it be interesting to look at just the survey just to show what it looks like and get an idea of people? I don't know if that's, we able to do that?
Nick, yeah, that would be fine.
Okay. Is it showing the survey now, or do I have to reshare?
It is
I get
not.
to reshare.
Okay, 1 sec.
Mr. Chair, there's multiple hands raised too.
Well, let's go to questions. Actually, that might be better. We want to do that. So I'll pass it to you, Chet.
I can see the hands now. So I'll start at the top of my list. Chessa, your hand is raised.
Hello. Quick question on, could you go to slide 3? I know you mentioned you guys are going to do, and this speaks to the education part of my question. You guys are going to explain what microtransit is, and just looking at that 3rd slide where you say on-demand transit, microtransit, mobility on demand, and then in future slides, you use microtransit / on-demand. So my question is the study just focused on microtransit as titled, or are on-demand transit and mobility on demand options also being considered? And I think terminology will probably be important when selling it to the public or education wise. Did my question make sense?
It definitely made sense. And I think pushing forward, microtransit and on-demand transit, I use them kind of interchangeably because sometimes the microtransit is associated with the technology, whereas you might have an on-demand that maybe is a call-in system. So I just think it's just varying levels of on-demand transit, and the microtransit gets more at that technology. So and you'll see like with the survey, we kind of focus in on certain questions that ask people how they would use the technologies and how they would use those types of service. So I hate to say right now it's just solely going to be microtransit versus like maybe we call it an on-demand transit and it has varying elements. So we just want to make sure we keep it ourselves kind of open-minded and really design these services for the region rather than, our just clear definition.
Yeah, I think this would be a little bit confusing because I did hear you say Bay Transit and that's shown as an on-demand transit, but we're talking about a microtransit. So I think terminology consistency. When you're speaking externally, I guess you have some groups are more educated than others, but
Yeah, I did bring up Bay Transit because we were just talking about the providers that already exist, but they do actually operate microtransit currently, not in the Richmond area, but they do. At least we have a template to look at that an operator in the Richmond region does actually do currently. So,
thank you.
Tiffany, your hand is raised.
Yes, so that kind of touched on my initial thoughts about the distinction between on-demand transit and microtransit. I did also want to offer, I know it wasn't highlighted in the peer, like the stakeholder or the peer agency review, but both Bay Transit and in Mountain Empire started running their microtransit pilots under us at DRPT. And while I know that they aren't exactly the same size as GRTC, there will be a lot of the similarities in terms of issues with procurement and technology issues and implementation. So if there's an interest that you would want to talk to them, because they are now roughly about 4 months into service. And so if that's an interest, feel free to reach out to me. I'm kind of part of the project team for that, but I think there'd be benefit at least talking to them, especially with Bay, because like you said, they do provide service within the region, but just to kind of get an idea of how it has been, at least from both the technology procurement and then the marketing. The other thing I kind of wanted to ask about was related to like the analysis on the zones. So I think that was under task 1 with the existing conditions. I guess my question is that with microtransit, there's always an idea about whether or not you want to look at service zones that are going to expand your range of service for your current transit providers, or if it's something that's first mile, last mile connections to existing route, which I know looking at the map, it's not going to be something that's feasible for GRTC in the short term, or underserved fixed routes. So I just think that part of the challenge when we're looking at this microtransit study is that we need to be very clear from GRTC's perspective about what kind of microtransit services are being met in terms of the needs, especially for the outlying counties. And I know that's very big interest in terms of mobility services and microtransit. So I think that, having the propensity is helpful so they have an idea where potentially you can roll out. But in order to really see where there's a need that's going to be met in terms of the microtransit services, we might need to be a little bit more specific on some of these service gap areas.
Yeah, and I think, first to your first comment, I wanted to say, we're definitely going to reach out to Bay Transit as part of the service operators, but maybe, Tiffany, it would make sense to include you in that conversation as well, so you could give us some lessons learned and operational considerations to think about on that process. So I just volunteered you for another meeting.
That's perfectly fine.
But in terms of use cases, that's a really important point, because part of task 1 and task 3, when we do best practices, is we're introducing this idea of use cases, whether it is that first and last mile and you kind of have to pair it with your existing conditions, your first and last mile and or your new service area, and kind of understand what the region wants. And even the survey kind of gets out at that, like, what are we trying to do with this service and how would people use it? And each zone doesn't have to be the same use case either. So if we do multiple zones, maybe one is its primary goal is to connect into the existing fixed route, whereas another zone, maybe their primary use case is just a new service area where it connects the population to activity generators like medical facilities, shopping within that zone. And some zones might have two use cases where it is a first and last mile and an internal circulation zone. So as we work through our existing conditions and identify these high-level zones, and as we prioritize them and move through the process, that will be one part of the process where through an analysis, we understand how people are moving within that zone and what use cases make the most sense.
Perfect. The last thing I was going to ask is under the recommendations, are we looking at like different types of service models? So if it's going to be just the software as a service package, or where we are using GRTC's existing fleet and operators, or would you think about the whole transportation as a service package? So providing a provider that does the fleet, operator, and software.
So in our best practices, we introduce both types to GRTC, and whoever reads that memo, on our end, we're keeping it open-ended because it has to come out of like what types of services can be operated, who's going to operate them, like how would this service work in the region. So right now our direction is keep it open, and as we start having these discussions with stakeholders and local operators and GRTC and continue through that, we'll kind of define that as part of the process.
Perfect. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tiffany. Tiffany, real quick before we move on to Barb Smith's question, where is Bay Transit's pilot project?
So right now their pilot project is focused on their existing Hive Express route. And so they have two service zones on the north and the south end of the Hive Express that they're focusing on. So that's primarily in Gloucester County.
Gotcha, thank you. Barb Smith.
During the discussion, I heard some mention of the TPO boundary versus entire counties, and I just want to be sure everyone knows that this is a CVTA driven study, so it would include all of those counties, even outside of the TPO boundary.
Yeah, that's partly my fault. I keep sort of conflating the two when I mention it, but yeah, it would include all 9 jurisdictions. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Barb. Joe, your hand is raised.
Yes, so I just wanted to we touch on the survey. We received the survey, and I think from our organization's perspective, they were looking at it as perhaps responding as just a representative, one response representative of an official county position. But I'm not sure that was your intent when you sent that out, and that you're probably looking for a much broader response than just the agency's response. Is that correct? And if so, then you might want to just kind of clarify that.
Yeah, the survey is intended for the public as well. So yeah, we're looking for a much broader response than that. So we'll clarify. We'll talk to GRTC about clarifying the language.
Right. I was hesitant whether or not I should respond as Joe Bidunas citizen, or just step back and just let the agency respond.
You can definitely respond as per citizen, as a citizen too. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's meant for a public.
Okay,
outreach.
great. Thank you.
So I don't see any other hands raised. Does anybody else have any questions on this topic? All right, and I'd like to compliment the group. Y'all did a great job on raising your hands. So after however long in COVID, we've mastered the virtual meeting. So congrats, everybody. Nick, question for you on setting up the one-on-ones with the jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Is that going to flow through the CVTA TAC members, or is that going to go to CAOs, or how's that process going to work?
I think we're going to work with GRTC about scheduling them and figure out what they're most comfortable with. Likely the people that would be in the meetings are going to be here on this call. That's just my best guess right now. But and then if when we do have those one-on-one meetings, we'll probably want the jurisdictions to open it up to the people that they believe also need to be in those meetings. So we might start small and then let the jurisdictions add as they see necessary.
Okay, and
But we'll work with GRTC on that
all
when we get around to starting the schedule.
right, and do you anticipate those meetings will be in person or virtual, or is that undetermined at this point?
That's to be determined. They'll be in January, so I mean, I would guess virtual right now, especially since it's probably easier to schedule, and then go off that assumption until something changes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other questions for Nick or Jessica? All right, thank y'all very much. Thank you, Patricia,
Thank you.
for organizing that. So moving on to next item 7, regional project prioritization. We have a number of items or sub items under this topic to cover. So Chet, you're going to start that.
Yep, thank you. Hopefully my screen is being shared. Should be the agenda view right now. There's a lot of information here under item 7, so bear with me as we make our way through it. The first item 7A is a review of the discussion that took place at the October 29th authority meeting, with a focus here on the process that we started discussing at that point. The first is an understanding of what our regional budget is going to be for regional allocation or regional revenues collected, and the expected or the forecast amounts, so that we can establish a 6-year budget for our regional project allocations. The second component was understanding the costs of potential projects to be considered, with a primary focus on this, what we'll call 1A right now, the first 2 years of expected revenues, that would focus on authority priorities like the fall line and other included regional or rural projects that have been discussed. This is all kind of in process for final consideration at the December 3rd authority meeting, because we are concurrently validating project scoring and ranking as we're required to do through the legislation, and all that will be ready in advance of the December 3rd meeting for final consideration. So the first thing I wanted to do today was for folks who had not watched the authority meeting to show you what we're expecting, what the expectation is in terms of projected forecasts. On the screen and in your agenda packet, the table in the middle here that's in blue text, our regional revenue contribution by jurisdiction, lays out FY22 through FY28 by jurisdiction, but at the right-hand side is the sum for each year in terms of what the forecast revenues are expected to be based on VDOT estimates from this time last year. So we're looking at roughly $500 billion over the next 8 years, including FY21. What I guess the other item to be considered here is the table at the bottom right, which is the consideration for what I've mentioned as 1A, which includes actual revenues collected in FY21 of $47,741,000, and then the first forecast year of FY22 which is 66 million and some change. So this is the amount of funding that the authority is considering for the first 2 years as the first commitment for this regional revenue process. I also included in your agenda a page after this, which shows the actual ledger amounts for FY21, and it shows. I'm sorry, my screen is moving slowly. I highlighted in yellow the $47 million that I mentioned on the first screen, just to show some that we did our homework in coming up with those numbers. So what this means for at least this agenda item 7A is that the authority agreed in concept to this approach and drafted and approved a letter, an interim update to the governor's office, outlining the process that the authority is considering through its December meeting to make a commitment to the fall line and the associated projects, and to ask for assistance with any gap in funding between the regional revenues that are projected and the total cost estimate for those that list of projects. So that letter has been signed and sent. And now the work is on the two committees, the technical committee and the finance committee, to make sure that everything is in place to have the elected officials make an informed decision on the 3rd. Mr. Chair, I've gone through a 7A. I see a question.
He's muted.
Sorry, I was muted. So yes, Chessa, we have a question from you.
Yep, real quick. Chet, you said that it was 8 years in the blue table, but 2021 is not in there, so.
That's correct. I misspoke.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that 505 plus the 47 million.
47, okay.
Yeah.
Are you gonna update that, or is that not a big deal?
Well, that table was just a forecast.
Okay.
It didn't include the actual. So yeah, I mean, we can adjust that and do a total table based on both of those.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was tracking. I'm listening so I can track. It's a lot.
And Chet, this was the same table that was presented to the full authority at their meeting the other week, correct?
Yes, yeah, this was the one that came from the finance directors. So we haven't changed that.
And to your earlier point, there will likely be updated revenue projections from VDOT in December.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So some of these numbers may change at that point, just as they did.
Yes, I wouldn't expect it before the authority meets though.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on this item? All right. So
okay.
Move on to B.
All right. So next item. This included in your packet, and I wanted to make this as transparent as possible so that it makes sense to TAC members, to finance committee members, and then to the public if they're looking through the website. So what we have tried to do with some committee members' help is understand not just 1A, which I just went through the first 2 years, but for all 6 years, how is the process going to work for the CVTA to consider expected revenues / budget, potential projects, and decisions to move those projects forward, and how those will impact other things like Smart Scale, which starts next year. So what we did was go through upcoming meeting schedules and lay out between the TAC, the Finance Committee, the Authority, and then individual staff items, what potential actions would be to move 1A forward, 1B, which is, we'll call 1B is years 3 through 6 of this first cycle. And then the ultimate timeline of understanding if is leveraging for smart scale applications for other grant programs in the future, and how this could all work together to make those things keep moving forward. So this is, I think it's 4 pages, and it's a schedule that essentially sets us in line, at least for, I think at a minimum level, things that the TAC should be considering at its meetings for the upcoming 6 months or so. And this doesn't include things that, other requests that the authority might make, or feedback on finance committee recommendations or those kinds of things. This is just focused on the regional projects and the process to move that forward.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Jerome.
Chet, I was just looking at this and I see under the December 13th date that the application window closes on 12/17. I'm just wondering when it opens.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dorena. We're going to cover that in like two other agenda items.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you for raising that question, Donna, because that was on my list. So we may have to come back in and add another date box once we talk about it further, Chet.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? All right, actually, I have a quick question, Chet. You're on the public hearing for the initial project list, which is shown under December 3rd. What's the required period for public comments?
We believe that it's 15 days, which is what we've done for the TPO, but we'll certainly have to confirm that after, I guess, in advance of the finance committee meeting on the 10th. We'll make sure we understand what that is, and we'll have to adjust the timeline if it's something different.
Okay, so as we understand it, the public hearing for the initial project list will be held as part of the full authority meeting on the 3rd, and then public comment is the 15 days or whatever that period of time is following that public hearing, or is it prior to?
I think our thought was that it would be prior to, that the finance committee would be able to take that action to open the public, or to start the window.
Okay.
And then the authority would be able to take action on the 3rd. But I'll have to talk with legal counsel and make sure that's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions on this process schedule? All right, hearing none, keep going.
Okay, so back now to item 7 again. We do have a requested action on that timeline to keep things moving forward. Due to the quick nature of basically everything that TAC is doing these days, my recommendation is that the committee approve the timeline with an understanding that it could be updated as needed based on new information.
Okay, and one of the known items is to the point of Jerome's question regarding adding a timestamp for the opening of the 1B round of applications, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So with that understanding, do we have a motion to approve this timeline?
I'll make that motion. This is Barb Smith.
Thank you, Barb Smith. Do we have a second?
Second, Dorana.
Thank you, Dorana. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Chet, do you want to take a roll call vote or voice vote?
Sure. Janice, are you able to do that, please?
Yes. 1 second. Charles City County, Ms. Russell.
Yes, A.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Yor.
Aye.
New Kent County, Mr. Stauder.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Vice Chair Clark.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the roll call for that item.
All right, thank you, everybody. So moving on to item 7C, project application overview. Jet.
Thank you. This is something included in your agenda under 7C that mirrors closely the RSTP CMAQ application that was developed for the current round that's currently underway. And this is really the intake that we envision for applications for those year 3 through 6 window for this first round, so that projects could be considered for inclusion and subsequently scored and ranked for the decision-making process. It's pretty basic, and I believe, yes, the PDF that's in the agenda is clickable, so you could see, at least in the pull-down menus, what the options are. But it includes basic information for each type of project, general overview, title, description, and type, which fits the 7 types that were outlined in the framework, the review framework that TAC recommended and got approved. Yeah, that's it there. Planning status, who's going to administer it? Is it in the local comp plan? Is it in the local CIP? Is it included in the LRTP constrained project list? And then estimated schedule, PE right-of-way construction start and end, cost estimate for each of those phases, the total cost of funding requested, and then I believe the last page, other funding, if there's anything else committed to it, that leveraging question. And then the last one is an option to submit supplemental materials. And this is key because it includes things like another supporting study, project sketches, et cetera, that could support the application. Part of this was put in place because staff has already got the framework for RSTP CMAQ, and this wouldn't be a huge lift to use this process similarly to what we did with that, especially if we are looking for applications to be in a pretty short window. But this is web-based. It can be changed if there are other things that we need to add, or if there are things that need to be excluded. I think as we put this draft together for your review today, the focus was on keeping it as simple as possible and including the data that was needed. But we certainly could have missed something when we put that together.
All right, thank you, Chet. We have a couple hands raised. Barb, you're up first.
On the other fundings page, so committed funding, I understand. Reasonably expected funding, is that where that's sort of the leveraging part of it?
Yes, I think that's the case.
I don't know if there's a way to kind of clarify that. I reasonably expected to me means I'm pretty sure I'm going to get smart scale money, and I am never sure I'm getting smart scale money.
Yeah, Miles, you're here. Are you able to address that?
Sure. This is Miles. So for RSTP CMAC, we developed the definitions, and I believe they were also copied into the CVTA framework as well. Basically, committed is something that's allocated that you can point to in the SIP or in an approved budget. Reasonably expected is consistent with the previous funding levels of a program, but not necessarily programmed yet to the project. So, for example, local CVTA funds that you expect in future fiscal years.
Okay, I think you need another category that says leveraging. That this funding request is to use as leveraging in another program. You know, for the instances where I'm going to get some CVTA money and it's not all that I need for a project, and I'm going to go apply for Smart Scale. Using CVTA as leveraging. Is that you
Well,
would know because of this here on the cost estimate?
Sure. This is Miles again. We could use it here, and we could add the question. We actually had a specific question on the RSTP application forms that specifically asked, is this for leveraging? So we could very easily add that, and it's just a yes/no question on there as well.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Good question, Barb. And Miles, for clarification on your last point, I did not have to deal with the RSTP CMAC applications this round. So where you had the item about was this for leveraging, did you ask for specification on what program, whether that be Smart Scale or other funding programs?
We didn't, but we can easily add that as another box, just add the details in.
That may be good because this could go across a different universe of fundings. So not to make it any more lengthy. Joanna, you had a question?
I did. My question was in regard to some of the, I was going back and forth and I'm like, okay, maybe the determination of whether or not it meets the regional intent is done at the scoring side. But then I'm looking to see, whether or not there's enough triggered information to provide it. Like, what's the projected ADT, or like, is that, something that's going to be required in the project description? Like, what's going to trigger the reviewer to see those requirements?
Chet, do you want me to take this one?
Sure. Thanks, Miles.
Sure. So Dorona, the thought on this was, as you already know, with the RSTP applications, we asked for specific lists of what were your improvements towards bike ped, what are your improvements towards all these different types of improvements following kind of what's done in Smart Scale. The thought on this was, since we're only scoring those handful of categories, the accessibility, mobility, and I forget what the third one is that we're using, the safety, we don't need all that information. Most of the ADT, all the information for these larger corridors, we already have it. I mean, VDOT's counting this data, it's updated annually. So we don't need anything really other than knowing where the project is to calculate a lot of these and plug them into the model. So the hope was that we would have enough just from the description and your sketches to be able to plug this in. And then obviously if we needed more clarification, we could refine this for a future year. But since this was a quick turnaround, we thought we'd have enough just with the sketches and your brief project descriptions.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Joanna?
Yeah.
Okay. Sharon, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just had a quick question about the JOT forms that we use for the RSTP CMAC applications. And we seem to have some concerns with it not saving to a linked account, because like the boxes sometimes wouldn't save the information, even though it said it saved. So I wasn't sure if others had any issues with that or
So
how to address that.
I can address this one too, Chet. What we've done on this, Sharon, is to provide the PDF that you see here. So the fillable PDF with the submit link does the exact same thing as the online form without you having to do the online form. So we just created an alternative that makes it easier for everyone rather than just relying on that save functionality.
Thanks, Miles.
We also want to do a training for how to use the form to make sure everybody's on the same page for maybe the next round to be able to, you know, it's a new process. There's a learning curve. We want to make sure everybody is able to use it. But yeah, I think what's in the agenda packet doesn't have the submit button in it. And if we're adding the leveraging item, we can clean all this up and get it back out pretty quickly.
Okay, so at this point, this is really just a preview for initial feedback and review. So I want to make these changes and send it back out to the group for, I guess, further input.
Yeah, and this gets back to Dorena's question earlier about the schedule. I mean, I think once everybody's in agreement on the form, we can open it at any point, open the window for applications to start being worked on. So I think that between now and whatever we said, the 17th of December, that's kind of the block for applications to be considered for years 3 through 6.
Okay, well, we're sitting on November 8th right now, so assuming y'all would like a few days to make these tweaks before you send it back out. So maybe end of this week, if you can send it back out to everybody, that gives a week for review, comment, and send back if there's any requested changes.
It shouldn't take long at all to get the changes that we talked about today incorporated. So we should be able to get it sent out soon. I don't know if people have time later in the week to get back comments to us by Friday, but the sooner we get comments, the sooner we can go ahead and open everything up. Well, I mean, I guess in the meantime, you've already got, you know what the applications are going to include for the most part. So without having the form, you could still start putting things together.
Right. Yes, John?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I didn't know if we needed the TAC approval of the process kind of pending no substantial comments after the revision. Or Chet, do you think just getting comments in after you submit it will be okay? Or do we need to approve the application itself?
That's a great point, Darren. Honestly, I'd prefer being able to operate the TAC is in approval with the addition of the leveraging question.
As my opinion, we can probably do this off of consensus with the understanding there'll be some tweaks. If anybody has any major issues or concerns with the form, the format or approach, I guess that would be a good time to bring that up now. So not hearing any, why don't we just move forward with that approach, Chat?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Also, Janice, I don't know if you saw in the chat, nor I don't know if she's been able to get in, but she was trying to get in meeting.
Yes, she's in now.
Okay, great. Welcome, Nora. All right. So,
Mr. Chair, before we go on, can I just check, Sharon, do you still have a question or is your hand still raised?
No, I'm trying to figure out in this app how to get it lowered. I'll get there. Sorry, guys.
There you go.
okay, so that moves us on to item 7D.
Yes, 7D. There was no link in the agenda package because it got finalized this morning, but in the chat, at the very top of the chat in Zoom, I put 2 files for your consideration, and I'll share them on the screen too. So what we did, and Miles was leading this, was to take a look at, based on those first 2 years, the FY21 actual and the FY22 forecast, what are some potential funding scenarios that could be considered for those first 2 years based on the projects that have been discussed by the authority. So there's two scenarios here. The first, which is on your screen, is the cost per mile scenario. And this is maximizing the amount of mileage constructed using those first 2 years of funds. So both tables are set up in a similar way. The grayed out areas in the top, I think it's 7 rows, are projects that have gotten committed funds through other means. So those are taking out. There is no remaining need. And then the projects below that are based on the costs and the cost estimates that have been discussed. And then we're split out between FY21 and FY22. The fifth column here is total funds. So it's a sum of 21 and 22 funds. And then any other funds that might have been committed to the project, finally with a remaining need at the bottom. So, and then at the bottom of the table, you have your totals and then a split between rural and urban funds based on the discussions that the authority has had. So in terms of, I think the last note here is the project descriptions. Most of these are fall line costs, the FL, and then the other projects is an R for rural, and then the county name, and then the project that was highlighted there. So the first one here is rural New Kent, and that's going to be the park and ride lot that was highlighted in the request to the authority that was discussed at the 29th. So that's the notation for each of the projects. The other table. So this one, again, is cost per mile to maximize the amount of mileage constructed. The other table was low to high cost to maximize the number of projects. So you get more projects here, but less total mileage. And these are two of the scenarios that staff came up with to present a possible funding scenario. Thinking about next steps and that the green scheduling, what we're looking at now is short. We're looking at the Finance Committee considering this on Wednesday, considering one of these or some combination, and then being able to be put in a position for a recommendation to be considered at the December 3rd meeting. So again, this is all new as of this morning. I apologize for the late notice, but there's a ton of moving parts, as we all know. Happy to discuss this now. Miles is here if there are any technical questions on how the allocations were made.
Thank you, Ted. I will have a question, but I will let Barb go first.
Would it be easy enough to show these on a map? You know, I'd kind of like to see how the two scenarios pan out as far as segments go, whether we've got some segment that's just sitting out there all by itself and it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I asked the same question.
Okay.
I asked the same question when I got the tables, and Miles set me straight that what we're lacking right now, we need a shapefile from VDOT, because what we don't have right now is the revised route through the city that was finalized late last week. So Mark, if we can get that from you, we can segment it out based on these proposed sections.
We're happy to provide you anything that we have. Absolutely.
Great, thanks. Should I be working with you?
Yep, Liz or I, either one is good. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Mark.
So So Chet, this discussion may kind of segue into the next agenda item after we're done with 7 with 8 in the working group. And Mark and Shane, if he's on, are welcome to comment as well. But it's my understanding that the commitment from the CVTA was to basically do a lump sum allocation to fall line with the determination of where the money went and when, kind of based on project schedules, delivery, and all the items that have really not been thoroughly vetted as a region yet. But somebody's welcome to correct me.
Yeah, that seems like another way to deal with it. And I guess kind of what I was expecting. So this is a little bit more detailed than I was expecting that we would be at this point. But thinking about the next item on the agenda, or at least item number 8, maybe that's something that would be discussed with the committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the concerns is that we still have a funding gap after the commitment of the CVTA regional money of, between 60 and 70 million. Those numbers are going to keep moving around as project phases develop and funding falls into place. So we don't want to leave unfunded gaps with no funding plan to fill those gaps. So it's going to probably take a more detailed conversation than we can have at this point on the meeting, which is part of the intended purpose of the working group. But I mean, this is a good first stab to kind of give us a good picture of where we are at the moment. I just have reservations about taking this to finance and to the full authority with an ask for action on funding scheme 1 versus 2.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, that's fine with us. Staff wanted to make sure that we were fulfilling the things that we were supposed to do. So I think this should be helpful down the road, regardless. So we're happy to wait. I mean, in terms of the December 3rd meeting, that would set the final request and communication to the governor's office, and then we wouldn't really know till there's a response to that what our total funding availability is. So it makes sense to wait.
Right. I mean, like I said, this would be great as an informational item, especially for the authority, especially if we can get it graphically, because I don't know why Barb doesn't have all her phone line segments memorized by face, but I guess not everybody is engrossed in it as we are. Yeah, anyway.
Okay, I have to defend myself. If I only had as many as Henrico had, I could probably memorize them all. But are some of these segments in the gray segments for which other funding sources are being sought? Also, that's another reason why I think it would be good to not be very specific at this point, is because I know we've got a bunch of applications in for little pieces, so I think just talking about hunks of money rather than specific segments is good for now.
Yeah, that's a great point, Barb. Thanks for bringing that up. So just as an illustration, I see Durana has a question too. On the screen, the first project up there, 3E.1, is a project that it's Route 1, Food Lion to Falling Creek, and that was a smart scale application. So there's a point that I wanted to bring up with this group regarding Fall Line. If we can come back to that after we finish this discussion, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So I think Barb, in part, answer to your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chet, that's the project segments shown in gray are supposed to be fully funded as we understand them now, right?
That's right.
All right. Dorana, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Just quickly, it's just trying to think about incorporating the financial advisors in the funding scenario. How helpful would additional information be? I'm just trying to think in my head what role providing them with different information would be helpful to them, or do we not see any of this type of information being helpful? One, like with the mapping, and then two, with I just think there are other potential scenarios other than these two that maybe we can begin to gather to then work towards a solution.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think there could be other scenarios. I mean, our focus right now is on those first 2 years. I think that the financial advisors would be able to bring more information regarding leveraging and other options long-term that could be considered years 3 through 6. But I think our assumption at the staff level right now was we're focusing on cash only for these first 2 years and see what we could get out of that. If there are other ways to think about this, then I mean we're game.
Hey, Todd, this is Barb.
Yes, Barb.
Yeah, I feel like we should kind of set this aside like we talked about. And when we start on item number 8, I feel like we really need that fall line committee to talk about how we would implement or move projects forward. Because we need to think about cash flow. Even though we're talking about the first 2 years, we won't be able to spend the first 2 years of money in 2 years. It's gonna be spread out farther than that, but we don't really know who's doing what, how VDOT is thinking about administering projects that they would administer, how localities are going to administer projects they're going to administer. So I think that committee really is going to have an important role initially in getting projects implemented, whether it's all of them, if we get lucky with the state, or a portion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll do the initial response to that, Barb. I agree. That was kind of why we were thinking the working group was a much needed entity at this point, as much as we don't want to commit to more meetings and more working groups and committees. But I think there's a lot of unanswered questions which do affect project delivery, schedule, spending plans, and so forth. So, and then the other big known, of course, is what additional money, what form does that take through VDOT based on the ask of the CVTA. So that we probably won't know until some point in December, I assume, at the earliest. Chad, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, we're in agreement that we should set this aside. I guess my one ask of the TAC is, should we share this as a draft with Finance Committee, or is that confusing the issue until we know for sure what the outcome of the letter is going to be?
I think we should just be talking about chunks of money at this point.
Okay.
Dorana, you still had your hand raised. Did you have an additional question, or was that from before? I will take her silence to be that she did not have an additional question. If I was wrong, please correct me, Don. So you good on that item, Chet?
Yes, can we quickly come back to fall line estimates?
Yes.
That was not on the agenda, but I guess there's the purpose of putting together an interim letter to the governor was to see if we were missing anything. And one of the things that kind of raised a point was with the spreadsheet that was shared with the fall line estimates, the gap for some projects is negative, meaning it takes away from the total need. And the negative amount is typically in a place where there is a smart scale application and the funding received through that, the committed funding through that application was higher than the estimate that was prepared by VDOT. So it showed as a negative number in the gap. The result of that is we had shown 178,585,000 as the need. If we take out those negative amounts that were reflective of the smart scale applications, that number is going to go up. So the gap will be higher. We're looking at 195 million or so. And I think the question was, do we leave that surplus for the smart scale applications and go with the amount that we have with some type of assumption that the surplus for those projects could be redirected to fall line somehow? Or do we change the gap to a higher number and make that which would make the request to the governor higher as well? I mean, that's where it would pass through. Does that make sense?
So
It does. I have a thought on that, but I'll take others' questions and comments first. Barb, do you have something?
yeah, so for our projects, it's not a surplus. It's how much that project really cost. So, which brings another concern, which is if you look at the ones that we're showing that negative number compared to the estimate, it's an indicator that the estimate are running too low, perhaps. So I wouldn't do anything to be conservative with the number that we're showing as the bottom line.
All right, thank you. Joe, you had your hand raised.
Yes, essentially what Barb said. Until the project's complete, I wouldn't rely upon the estimate as being the cost. So what appears to be surpluses may not, in fact, be surpluses.
Thank you for that. Shane, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Hey, I just want to make sure everybody understands the estimates that VDOT put together for all the sections are current year dollars. The smart scale project awards are based on later construction years. So I think that's some of the difference, probably in a lot of cases, a lot of the difference that we're seeing is just when this is going to be constructed and inflation being put in there. So like Barb said, they're not surpluses on those projects. It just appears that way because the estimate is today dollars, but the funding is future dollars. So hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
And it might be that we need to inflate all of the estimates so that they reflect really when a project's going to be delivered. But I don't think it's going to get it up to some of the numbers that we're looking at with our projects.
Barb, that's a good point. I think probably some of that could be parsed out when through the working group as we build schedules and project delivery, because that's going to affect all those things as well. And I will say, just based on the several segments within Henrico County of the fall line that show surpluses, those are not smart scale projects. And if anything, some of the estimates may be low based on what we're seeing at this point. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So I don't think to your point, Chet, that we want to pull out the ask going to the state at this point, saying that this is money that can be reallocated to other phases of the project. I just don't think we know enough at this point on cost estimates and schedules to be able to do that.
That's fair. I mean, as I guess as the schedule keeper for the group now, we want to have that number revised for the December 3rd meeting, or for the agenda packet for the December 3rd meeting, because the letter is going to change. So I guess the question is, does it need further discussion at some point? Do we just want to zero out the gap cell for those items where there's other funding coming in, and use the resulting number there for the need? Or is there a different approach?
So question of clarification. So is the number that was in the first letter to the governor, did that not reflect the revised estimate that showed surpluses, or did that not reflect that number?
It reflected what's in the spreadsheet. So yes, it included a takeaway of the surplus amounts. They're not surplus amounts.
Right, right.
It included a takeaway of those funds.
Do we know what that total was?
Like I said, I think it's somewhere between 190 and 195 million.
193.9
There you go, Chessa.
versus the 178.6.
Yeah.
So it's like a $15.3 million difference when you exclude those.
I will defer to the group and what their thoughts are.
What's the question?
We need to show what the ask is in the letter, that the final letter that the authority's going to look at for December 3rd. So should it show 178 or 193?
193.
All right, going once. All right, yeah, I think based on everybody's comfort level, Chad, I think what we're hearing from the group is we don't want to show those as surpluses. So that needs to be reflected in the total cost at this point.
Is TAC willing to take an action on this so that I can discuss it with Finance Committee on Wednesday?
We can certainly make that request. So do we have a motion to revise the fall line trail cost estimate? Is that the correct way of phrasing that, Chet?
I'll make a motion that we update the fall line trail estimated outstanding gap cost to reflect the 193 number.
All right, thank you, Barb. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Joe. A motion, a second. Any discussion? All right, Chet, would you like to do a roll call vote?
Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have Charles City County. Ms. Russell.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Hanover County, Ms. Vadunez. Mr.
Aye.
Vadunez, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Yor.
Aye.
New Kent County, Mr. Stauder.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Vice Chair Clark.
And
And do we have, hold on one second, I believe we had Miss Amos join us. I'm not sure if she's still with us. I'll just call in case she is still with us. Town of Ashland, Miss Amos?
Aye.
Great. Thank you. That concludes the roll call for that item.
Thank you, Janice. Chet, we had one other item under 7.
Yeah, so this is just more of a request from staff, 70 committee coordination to meet the milestones. We're showing this in the work that we're doing this afternoon, but in order to make all this work, we're going to have to work closely between the TAC and the Finance Committee to make sure that information is in front of the authority, so that they can stay on schedule and get through decisions as needed. So I just ask for everybody to be as responsive as possible on top of all the other requests that are made of you. So thanks for your work with us, and we'll get through this.
All right, very good. Is that all you need to cover on that?
Good.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 8, fall line working group. So obviously we covered part of the reason we need this group. So we do not want to make it a formal subcommittee so that we don't have to record meetings and share minutes. Not that we're hiding anything from the public, but just for sake of efficiency. And then any recommendations that come out of that group will flow back through to the full TAC Finance Committee as needed and full authority as needed. So with that being said, this applies to the 5 localities that directly benefit from the fall line, as well as agencies responsible for helping deliver this project and fund this project. So with that being said, I think we start with the TAC group, but I think it's more than fair and appropriate to let each locality and agency involved bring on other staff as needed to help with this effort. And it sounds, especially after the last discussion, it sounds like we probably need to meet relatively soon to start these discussions. And I've already spoken with Shane, and he's more than receptive to have he and his team participate in this group. So since they're going to be doing some heavy lifting as far as sections of the fall line. So Chad, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said thus far.
I don't, assuming that the committee approves this, we probably want to take action on establishing the working group. And then my suggestion is staff can coordinate with you to set up the first meeting.
Okay, and what I had mentioned to Chet, assuming everybody's in agreement to support this working group, is that we try to set up the initial meeting sometime prior to Thanksgiving. So that gives us a little over 2 weeks. Maybe an aggressive ask, but at least we can try to have at least an initial meeting prior to Thanksgiving. If not that week, maybe the first week after Thanksgiving to start those conversations. So any questions or comments or concerns regarding this ask? All right, so this is an action item, I guess, for clarification. So I guess the default working group membership will be the impacted locality members that are on TAC, as well as VDOT. Is there anybody else that's on this call, or anybody outside of this call that we would wish to include?
The CVTA staff is default.
Yes, you're default. You're involved in everything, Chet. You don't even need to ask. So. But you're welcome to delegate if you would like. All right, hearing no questions or concerns, we'll entertain motion to stand up this working group for fall line.
Mr. Chair, this is Diana. So moved.
Thank you, Dorana. Do we have a second?
Second, Barb.
Thank you, Barb. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Do we want to do another roll call vote, Jet?
Yes, please.
Okay, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Aye.
Charles City County, Miss Russell.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Badunez.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Yor.
Aye.
New Kent County, Mr. Stauder.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Vice Chair Clark.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for that item.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
So, no other items under that topic. So moving on to agenda item 9, CVTA TAC member comments. Does anybody have any comments for group? Tiffany, your hand is raised.
Trying to follow protocol. So a quick question. It came up when Barb was talking about the TPO boundary. Have we done anything related to the changes to the TPO boundary? I know we had taken action like late last year about it. And I didn't know if those changes were planned to be implemented around the end of this year or early next year.
I can address that. The changes went into effect October 16th or 15th. So yes, they're already in place.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So for clarification, that means that all of Planning District 15 is now included in the TPO boundaries, which then matches the CVTA boundaries.
Yes, with the exception of the southern Chesterfield portion.
Right. So congratulations to Goochland, Powhatan, New Kent. I think Charles City was already fully in, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Doreen.
can I ask Tiffany a follow-up question, please?
Sure.
Tiffany, does the inclusion of of those rural localities, well, all of parts of that rural locality now, does that impact any of like the 5311 or 5307 funding from DRPT?
No, that is still reliant on the kind of the official designation. So for 5307 and 5311, those formulas should be the same, but I will double check just because we're coming up. We just heard from FTA that summer 2022, there's a new census data release. And so that could probably change some of the UZA boundaries and then impact potential FY23 apportionments. But it shouldn't have any significant impacts in terms of 5307 and 5311. So I'll follow up with you offline and I can check into that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the group? All right, our next meeting is scheduled for December 13th. And I guess everybody be on the lookout for an email from Chet and Miles with the revised draft project application form for regional funding sometime this week, correct, Chet?
That's correct.
All right. Keeping in mind that Thursday is assume a holiday for everybody. All right. If there's nothing else, then we may adjourn. Thank you for everybody's time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.